Bioshock Infinite. God, I can't believe we're already 45 games in. It's Halloween. We're coming to the end of the year, folks. It's fast approaching. Happy Halloween to you and yours if you celebrate. This is probably going to be the last big, I don't know, I mean, who knows, but I feel like I got a lot to say about this one. I don't know how it's going to go. Let's talk about Bioshock Infinite. Obviously, this year I have played all 3 Bioshock games. I've had mixed feelings about the first 2. I've never really given them much of a chance, and that's because I kind of came into the franchise with Infinite. I tinkered a little bit in the first Bioshock. I said that, I think, in the original video, but Bioshock Infinite, this game, when it came out in 2013, this was like, I was so, I mean, for months and months and probably years, I was extremely ecstatic for this game. I was looking forward to it every single E3 that it was mentioned. Like, I couldn't wait to play it. I just thought it looked so interesting, so different from anything I'd ever seen before. And when it finally came out, I played it and I really liked it. I think Last of Us was like the only other game that year that I thought was just like maybe a tiny bit better. And in hindsight, I think it's a lot better. But I just think, like, I always had this memory of Bioshock Infinite. I always cherished it. It was always one of my favorite games of the last 10 years. And since it's been nearly 10 years since it came out, I played the game a few times. After this playthrough, I had clocked over 50 hours in the game total. And that is not how long the game is, by the way. The game is probably like maybe 12 hours to play through. So you can imagine I played the game quite a few times in the years since 2013. But after all this time coming back to it, after playing Bioshock and Bioshock 2 earlier this year. So here's the thing. This is going to be kind of an in-depth review. I'm going to go into some minor spoilers. I'm not going to go crazy overload with the spoilers, but I would say if you haven't played the game and you're interested in it, my thoughts are this. It's great. It's really fun if you like shooters. It gives you a really interesting story. I know a lot of people don't like the story. They criticize it. I think the story is great and the gameplay is really fun, and I highly recommend it. Now, if you have played the game or you don't care about spoilers, the rest of this video, I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about the game as a whole. So with Bioshock Infinite, I want to kind of preface this by saying we don't know all the details, at least I certainly don't, but I had done a lot of research in the years since release, and it has been determined that essentially there were a lot of things that changed in the production of the game, a lot of characters who were once relevant or who are not really relevant anymore, and it shows definitely in the final product. I don't necessarily think it's a huge negative, but I do think that, as a whole, you can definitely feel like there are aspects missing. I want to mention that there are basically parts of the game that are, separated by the big enemy you come across. First one is the Motorized Patriot. I felt like they did a great job setting up this character, who's not really much of a character. I mean, at the end of the day, they just become an uncommon enemy after you originally encounter them. But the whole build-up, everything building up to him finally breaking free and attacking you is terrifying. And that's one element of the game I think a lot of people probably would criticize it for, is that unlike Bioshock and Bioshock 2, there is almost no horror in this game at all. It is just a different world, and not only in the story and the environment, but in the gameplay. It doesn't really rely on that kind of stuff. There are areas in the game where you can be stealthy, and it may even recommend you to be stealthy, but it's not part of the experience. You can go in guns a-blazing, and there's no real detriment to it. At the same time, there are also parts of the game that ask you to make a choice. There are very few of them. And if you remember when I talked about Bioshock, especially Bioshock 2, there were a lot of things in Bioshock 2 that asked you to make choices. But at the end of the day, it was good or evil. It was really straightforward. It's pretty similar in this game. There are very few choices, and they don't really matter. Sometimes you get a little something extra if you make a certain choice, but it's all pretty common sense shit. After the Motorized Patriot, progress further, you build up to the next big enemy, the Handyman, who I think is awesome, really well designed. They do a great job where as you go through the game, you see the Handyman, his big lumbering motherfucker who you do not want to mess with. And you see him a couple times throughout the game, and it builds to the final confrontation when you finally get up to him. And it's just like, when you finally confront him, it's so fucking out of nowhere. It's like there's no build-up. It's just like he's just there. And then again, he becomes an uncommon enemy. A little more uncommon than the Motorized Patriot, but still, it feels like there was more there. It feels like they were setting up more with this guy. And it kind of falls flat. And that's kind of the same thing that happens later. The next big enemy, which is essentially the only real boss in the game, is the Lady Comstock, who is definitely the hardest part of the game, I think. One of those bosses who just basically throws a bunch of enemies at you, wave after wave, and you have to really push through. But like it's a tough fight, and I remember, like, it's the one fight that I remember from when I first played it that I was like dreading in my replay. I was like, oh fuck, this is gonna suck. But it's really not that bad, honestly. If you just focus on her, it's a really cool, unique fight. It's one of the only unique fights in the game. And I think, it was well executed. The reason I mention it like this, the reason I'm going through the game like this is because once you get to Lady Comstock, it's like, after that, honestly, it just feels like the game kind of fucking rushes to the end. There is another special enemy, the Boys of Silence, so if that's what they're called, I'm not exactly sure. They don't actually fucking say it at any point, I don't think. After Lady Comstock, you enter the Comstock house, and man, like, they're just there, and like, oh, you have to be stealthy, because if they see you, it'll trigger all the enemies in the area to come after you, which is obviously what you don't want. There's like fucking 3 of them, and also like you don't actually fight them, because as soon as they see you, like, they just disappear, and that's it. So it's like, okay, so it's not even an uncommon enemy. It's a 3 times and that's it, and you never see them again. And it's just like, okay, cool. I mean, they're freaky looking, but it's like, oh, all right. And then after that, it pretty much just ramps right into the final sequence, which is not a boss fight. The end of the game, and one of the biggest criticisms I think the game gets is the final sequence is just a bunch of waves of enemies, which is definitely not great. And then you have the final story sequence, which again, I really enjoyed. I thought the, whole ending idea, and I'm not even going to spoil that. I just thought it was really well done. And I know a lot of people didn't like it, didn't think it made a lot of sense, but that's kind of where the DLC comes into play, which I did also play. So they released some DLC, Burial at Sea, which was split up into 2 parts. Episode 1, which at first it kind of seems like it's, you're in Rapture. It takes place in the world of Rapture, in the world of Bioshock and Bioshock 2. It's before the fall of Rapture, but things are starting to kind of fall apart. You see some splicers here and there. Things aren't quite what they seem. And, it's cool. It's a cool, like, alternate reality type thing. But then it kind of plays, again, a little trick on you where it's like, actually, this is actually still continuing the story of Infinite, which is, I thought was, again, a nice little clever twist. And then we get to episode 2. Which is definitely the best of the DLC. It's definitely the most unique and different in the sense that you now play as Elizabeth instead of the main character from Infinite, Booker. Now you're in control of Elizabeth, and you have to play stealthy because now you're not as strong as Booker. You can't melee enemies unless you hit them from behind by sneaking up on them. The other thing that's really annoying about this, which is like not annoying in the sense it's bad design, it's just annoying because it's kind of part of the experience, is that your weapons no longer do the same amount of damage. So even though you have the same kind of weapons, like a hand cannon or a shotgun, if an enemy sees you and you shoot them, even if you headshot them, even if you point blank range shoot them with a fucking shotgun, they do not die. They will take like half damage or sometimes even a quarter damage, because it really emphasizes stealth. And if you sneak up on an enemy and shoot them in the head, then they die always in one shot. They also give you a crossbow with like tranquilizer darts and things like that. So there's a bit of difference, and it definitely focuses on stealth and brings that element from Bioshock and Bioshock 2 that I thought Infinite was kind of missing. But it also takes away a lot of the fun stuff about Infinite, which was, the gunplay and stuff like that. So, you give and you take. But Burial at Sea, especially episode 2, focuses much more on tying the franchise together, specifically Bioshock 1. Obviously, the company that made Infinite and Bioshock 1, which eventually became known as Irrational Games, they did not make Bioshock 2. I don't believe they had any involvement whatsoever. So there's essentially no mention of that at all, which is kind of annoying. I feel like they could have at least thrown a bone to be like, hey, let's tie the whole trilogy together. But really, they basically just pretend to never happened, and they only focus on the events of Infinite and the original Bioshock. So at the end of the day, I feel like Burial at Sea episode 2 especially is truly a love letter to OG Bioshock fans. And that's awesome. Especially, I played both Bioshock and Bioshock 2 earlier this year. So to me, it's like, oh, wow, it really brings the whole story together. However, I also feel like it really tries to tie every single fucking potential loose end up, even loose ends you didn't know were loose ends, which some of them I thought were cool. I think like Suchong and Fink working together, explaining why Fink has so many things in Columbia in Bioshock Infinite that are similar to things in Bioshock. But it gets to the point where it's like they're really trying to tie every potential, why did this, blah, blah, blah. Even stuff that was explained in Bioshock 1, they try to like re-explain under new context in Bioshock Infinite Burial at Sea, which is like, again, it's like, I appreciate the fact that they're really trying to tie a bow on the franchise, but honestly, the way things end in Infinite, they kind of set it up to where you could both never make a Bioshock game ever again, which, newsflash, they didn't and probably never will, because Irrational is gone, and 2K, who I think owns the rights, I feel like there was rumors they were going to make another Bioshock for a while, but then they just never did. At this point, I feel like it would only be for a nostalgia grab, and it would probably just be a remake of Bioshock 1. But it feels like the ending of Infinite could have either never made another one again, or they could have just made a million Bioshock games. It sets it up to be like, well, yeah, here's the formula. So it's almost like, I understand, it's the man behind the curtain. Once you see behind the curtain, it takes away the special pizzazz, the whole act. But at the same time, I also feel like, yeah, but it would have just been fun to like fuck around in another world similar to Rapture or Columbia. And it doesn't even have to tie into the story events of any of the 3 Bioshock games. I think you could just make new stories and it would have been fun to play. But the way Burial at Sea treats it's no longer that open-ended, somewhat ending. It's more like, this is the fucking end, and that is it, wrapped up, goodbye, so long, thanks for coming. And again, as I mentioned, Irrational Games shut down. I think after Infinite, they did make a couple like indie games, maybe mobile games or something, but now they're gone. And like I said, the Bioshock franchise is kind of just like lost to time. Again, I believe 2K does own the rights. I know they did eventually release Bioshock the Collection on consoles, and I think the remastered versions of 1 and 2 on PC, which obviously I played Bioshock 1, and it was a fucking nightmare technically, which brings me to my point for Infinite, which is that I did play the Steam version of Infinite, and I had no problems with it whatsoever. Like I said, I put 50 hours into this game. It has never had any sort of issues running. Even back in 2013, I was playing on a shitty-ass laptop. I've never had problems with Infinite, and it played flawlessly here, as did Burial at Sea Episode 1. But Burial at Sea Episode 2, I would be remiss if I did not mention, I had a major fucking issue with this game, which was about 2 hours in. I was in a mission where you're searching for some items. I found the first 2 and I had to go find the final item. And on my way to that last item, the game crashed about 20 fucking times. And it's one thing for the game to crash. And, I looked it up to see, like, is this an issue? And all the way back to 2014, there have been people complaining about specifically Burial at Sea Episode 2 on Steam being a fucking nightmare, which is so poetic. Because it's exactly what happened to me when I played Bioshock 1 earlier this year. I did play 2 on PS4, and I had no issues with it, so I guess I should have just played Infinite on PS4, but I wanted to play the Steam version. I'd already played it a bunch. I wanted to keep playing it on Steam, and for some fucking reason, this game just has a huge crashing issue. I did manage to finally fix it and finish the game, but I was, at one point, pretty much content with just not finishing it because I had already beaten the main game. To me, that was enough, but I really wanted to give it a chance, and I messed with some stuff and got it to work. But I wanted to complain not just about the game crashing. That's already annoying. And Irrational's gone, so they're not going to update the game. I get it. But it's like, what makes me most mad, and this is just a rant on modern games in general, is why the fuck can you not manually fucking save? I understand the concept of autosaving. I understand the concept of checkpoints. And most of the time, that's fine and dandy. And you never want to be in a situation where you play a bunch of stuff and then you turn the game off and turn it back on. And it's like, oh, I forgot to fucking save, which I've done with old PS1 and earlier games. That happened to me, and it sucks. There's nothing worse than playing a PS1 game and realizing I don't have a fucking memory card. I mean, that shit happens. And I understand the advent of autosaving, checkpoints. That's great. But much like in Bioshock 1, this game does not let you save. And the reason it was such a problem for me this time was not because I was dying and being sent back a long way. It was because every time the game would crash, I would have to start over at the last checkpoint, which is so fucking arbitrary. It's like, you would think, oh, maybe when you collect a thing, like, or you pick up an item or something, you enter a new area, it counts as a checkpoint. Nope. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. It's fucking random. I don't fucking know. And it makes me so fucking mad because, like, I cannot think of a single fucking reason why you would not allow manual fucking saving. I understand, you can save scum and save, like, right before you do something or whatever, but it's like, dude, who gives a fuck? There's, like, why the fuck do I have to deal with this fucking, auto-saving bullshit so that every time the game fucking crashes, I have to go back and redo the same fucking shit over and over again? There's no fucking excuse, in my opinion, for modern fucking video games. At least Bioshock 1, that was 2007. They were still fucking learning. But 2013? Are you fucking kidding me? Like, this is fucking stupid. Unforgivable, unbelievable, and was incredibly frustrating. But at the end of the day, the game is done. I've wrapped up the trilogy, and my final thoughts on all 3 games are, I like Bioshock. I definitely think I would not recommend playing the Steam versions, because obviously there are some fucking technical issues. But that being said, I do enjoy the Bioshock franchise as a whole. I know I've complained. These tend to be my longest videos this year because I just have so much shit to complain about. But as far as a franchise goes, I would like to see some more attempts. I'd rather not see a Bioshock remake, but I have a feeling if they ever were to make another one, that's what they would do. But I think 2K should just pick another studio, have them make a new Bioshock game, I guess the argument can be made, like, why even bother, just make a new IP? But it's like, yeah, but I feel like Bioshock is a really interesting game. All you really have to have is the world and the the gameplay, and then just really just erotic. I don't know. My brain is fried at this point, and it's been a long 10 months. We got 5 games left to go. Look, I don't know. I like Bioshock. I don't want to leave this on the cliffhanger here where I can't get my fucking thoughts out, but I don't even fucking know what to say anymore. It's been a ride, and I look forward to the last 5 games this year. Thank you, Bioshock, and so long. Don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out. Yeah, baby. Bunch of fucking noises and shit. Just add a bunch of fucking noises and wrap up half my fucking reviews. Oh, Jesus Christ.